So Fabrizio keeps ruining the introduction of this episode, and this is the second time that we are starting this. But hello, everyone, and welcome to Sahaj Times podcast. Can we say Christmas edition?
Yeah, we
Is it
get close enough. Close enough.
close
We are.
enough? Close enough. I'm wearing a red jumper, which is really Christmas-like, I guess.
Yeah. By the way, random story. At work, they sent an invite for an ugly sweater.
Here I
Uh,
am.
yeah, right. But ugly sweater actually means Christmas sweater. It doesn't mean ugly.
Ah,
Like I literally wore something dirty and broken, and I went to work like that. And everybody had this cool red, green, with the Christmas
ah.
decoration. Beautiful. Everybody was beautiful. And I was like, why don't you call it Christmas sweater event? Why ugly sweater? It was absolutely embarrassing. I had to go home and change.
Yeah, and you work in a place where the dress code is not important at all. Where
Exactly.
you don't have to keep the word peace. Is
The madness of society. Anyway, back to the episode.
Back to the episode. What are we going to discuss today, Fabrizio?
So, something very important. I think in the past, we had a lot of episodes on the SAHAJ institutions, right? Marriages, schools, and so on and so forth. In particular, we had also on the schools and the value that the such schools bring, and we still totally behind it, and we think it's super important. However, if you do a rough calculation, you might see that about 7-8% possibly of the kids who are in Sahaj go to such schools for different reasons. It can be, visa, financials, or other reasons. And so we thought, well, what are we doing for the other 92, 93% of the population who cannot go to such schools? So we thought to have an episode around this area. We are inviting Fatima from France. She grew in Sahaj, but not through the Sahaj school system. And she has a lot of interesting stories, including with Mataji. So we would like to hear from her a bit today.
Okay. So let's give a really warm welcome to Fatima on the episode. Hello, Fatima. How you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here today.
We are
I
really happy
loved
to have you.
I loved your story with the sweater,
With the
Fabio.
ugly sweat.
Cracked me up, my God. I wish there was a camera there to film your reaction.
And I was telling my
Uh,
wife, typical me, because also I work. I mean, I must say, I don't really like this kind of stuff. I like to go to work and come home to the kids. I try to minimize the time I spend at work. So I already didn't want to go to the party to begin with. Now imagine I have to go to a party where they misled me about the sweater.
But that is
oh
really
my
cool
God.
because it puts you out of your comfort zone, which
Aha!
is a little bit what sometimes growing up in Sahaj is like. It's like a bubble that is floating in the air, is somehow, yeah, floating in the air, but sometimes it's gonna break. And then you found yourself in a situation where you weren't prepared to be at your best, which is really normal. But sometimes this is what kids or yogis, when they grow up in Sahaj, feel like, because you grew up in an environment that is really protective, sometimes can be also a little bit fanatic. And that's why when you find yourself outside, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So we all share a background because we all grew up outside of a Sahaj school. So we know also we didn't live a double life. We had one life, and it was Sahaj and also now Sahaj. And I would say that now we can deal with both worlds. But what is interesting is that Fatima grew up in an ashram in London, in Chasham Road, if I'm not wrong. But then she had to leave the ashram for some reason. And I wonder how was growing up in an ashram and then finding yourself outside of the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. So I started off in a bubble, which was not the case later on, but that was the only time I lived in an ashram, actually. And with my parents, we were there until I was 3, maybe. Of course, I was a small kid, so I don't have a lot of memories, but one of them was that, Shimaji would come and visit now and then, because I'm not sure how many ashrams there were back then, but probably very few. And I just have this memory once where she was sitting in the living room. I don't know why in my mind she was sitting alone, but the door was only cracked open, so there were probably other people sitting around her. And I was playing with another friend, and we were just very amused. Obviously, we knew that it was a big event, that Shimaji was sitting there, so we were aware of that. And at the same time, we were shy, so we were just looking through the crack of the door. And she saw us at some point, said, come in. But we were shy. I just remember running back in the other direction. So these sweet, yeah.
Sorry, I just something into my mind, going off script, but I'm just thinking this because my kids say something like that last time. Is I was wondering, as a kid, right? You're a kid, you're very little, and you meditate on the picture of Shimaraji daily, right, with your parents, and then all of a sudden she actually comes, not the picture, but her. Like, you must have felt like, I mean, aside from the whole spiritual in side of it, there's also like a social, like somebody mega, like, did you understand as a kid that, this is the person who's coming, and oh my God, it's such a huge thing? Or you're like, oh, here, Shimaraji. Like, did you actually understand that she's there and not in the picture? You see what I mean? Like, my kids the other day, they were meditating on the picture, and they're like, I love it. I feel the vibration is great, but I'm also aware I'll never actually meet her physically. Like, now they're old enough to get that distinction, right?
Of course.
Did you feel that as a kid?
No, because as I was saying, this was a frequent occurrence, that we were able to meet Shimaji. Like, after school, mother would give these programs, and I have memories of my mom bringing me to the program. It was like our meditation, the weekly meditation, and we would just sit, and I remember a big hall, and she would make us sit right at the back, of course. She didn't want to disturb, and I remember having we're not supposed to eat in Shimaji's presence, but I do remember having my banana, having my snack, coming out of school, and there was Shimaji giving her program in a white sari. So, I think I don't know what came first, Shimaji or the picture, honestly.
Wow.
We were very lucky because I don't remember. No, it was not like, wow, yes, of course. Now the kids now, even my son says, what would it be like, to meet Shimaji? And I remember being in Cabela in the late 90s with my, actually early 2000s, something like that, with my goddaughter, Chiara. And she was sitting next to me, and she was like, "Mommy," no, she was telling her mommy, "The picture is moving." Shimaji was sitting on the stage in Cabela, and for her, she realized the picture is moving. That what she was saying is Shimaji is there. She's not just a picture. So sweet.
I love it.
But no, I don't remember them. I don't remember this. It was, I guess we would see her once in a while. So, yeah.
And also, maybe another thing which is important to, or people might not know necessarily, but I think growing up in an ashram in the 80s or 90s, with Shimaji's presence, it's, of course, is an amazing blessing, but also it's hard work, no? Like, you were expected to behave, early morning meditation, so it must have been a bit strict, no? Like, you must have had quite an intense routine going on, let's say.
Yeah, honestly, I don't remember the routine. I think I was probably not woken up at 4 as a kid, but my parents did go through all that.
Yeah.
And it was, I was the only child, and it was mainly bachelors, in the ashram at that time. So obviously, they wanted their, quiet time, and I was kind of the kid in the middle who was making noise and disturbing. So my parents were always a bit anxious, to keep me, that I should be well behaved and not disturbed. So there was that tension. And of course, those days were a little more fanatic. So I think, it was not easy in that way, and they might have been a little strict with me, and that was common, in those days. When I see the way
Yeah.
we bring up our kids today, it's totally different from the way our parents would do it, right? It
Yeah.
was much more strict, and there was no compromise. And on top of that, the layer of being with other yogis, bachelors, trying not to disturb, and to the point that Shimaji even told my parents once. She said, "You shouldn't be too strict with her, otherwise, she'll get out of Sahaja Yoga and she'll become a hippie." So they were warned, that that's the love of Shimaji. She knew everything, every situation, everyone by heart, and
Wow.
that guidance she would give it to everyone. Yeah.
But it's so I'm actually wondering because it was a really Sahaj family, you know, was really into Sahaja yoga, and as you said, a little bit also strict about Sahaja yoga. And did Shimadaji take any role in your growth? Because I don't understand how you didn't go to to a Sahaj school then.
Yeah, she did. She for everyone, in those days, she would give some directions. The first one in my case was, I didn't tell you this story actually. That's the cot story that I think it's in the recollection book of Auntie Linda Williams. I used to cry a lot, and my parents didn't know why I was crying when I was very small, a newborn. And then there was a puja, I can't remember which puja. And Shamaji saw me and she said, "There's something wrong, she's caught up." And my dad said, "Maybe it's the God, Shamaji." That, they didn't know back then that matter could carry vibrations.
Yeah.
And the God had been given to them by some other, some other yogini who had some serious right side, catches or whatever. And Shamaji was furious. She said, "What is this? I give you real-life
Wow.
souls, and you don't know how to take care of them. Of course, this person is caught up, so the cut will be caught up. You should change it immediately." And she blasted my parents, actually. And then what she did is she bought the cut herself, and she had it sent to the
Oh,
ashram.
sweet.
Yeah, it was a little rocking cut, I remember, because then my
Oh
brother
my
went
God.
into it. And years later, I got to know that there was a list, people were putting their name on the list for their baby, to be able to sleep in that cot. So it went around because, this was Shivaji, who had
That
bought
is
it.
so sweet. That is so
So
sweet.
sweet. Yeah. So on one hand, she was not, yeah, she was furious, but on the other hand, she gave, she bought the cot herself. Yeah. And gave it.
But this is insane to think that, guys, because I mean, now we are 30 years down the line, right? And our debates are, is it okay? Sometimes in the US they'll be like, if I drink and then I food soak after, like kind of this level of misunderstanding, right? And the detail that Shimaji would have in how you should grow spiritually. Even this is a crazy story. One auntie here in Switzerland told me that at some point we had a drink here. We were drinking juice or things like that, right? And in the room, and one of the kids was taking it, and the auntie stopped and was like, "No, don't drink this one, because the name of the drink starts with V." Now, I don't want everybody to take this story as the Bible and this and that, but this yogini said that once she was at the table with Shimaraji, and basically she mentioned that if there is something that is sold or cannot be consumed, if the name of the company or the brand or the starts with V, it's inauspicious. I don't know the full explanation of why. And for my kids, it was so hard to understand because they're modern logic in kids, and then be like, "But what's the point of V? Do you mean if I take the label out and I put it somewhere?" And that's what it is. That's what at that time the level of specific information that Shimarji would give, and not always something that you can understand. I mean, in the case of Fatima, it was very clear, but like in this case, and I can see for my kids who are not my kids or anybody of their age, who are not trained to the level of obedience. You know what I mean? Shimaji said this. Now you just do it. You don't argue. You don't talk back. It is very hard for the modern day generation to accept things that they cannot understand. They cannot just follow Shima because they don't have that personal connection to her, right? And even in this case, Fatima was saying she was very angry with my parents. Like, you will feel it. She really meant it, right? And that sense of urgency, and it's not the kid's fault. I'm just saying it's just a different time, and we need to achieve things in a different way, no? But it's quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, before she was there to give the directions personally, but now I think we should be able to understand, right, from within. We should have that discretion to know what is good for us or not.
Exactly.
But hopefully, you know, that's what she's expecting from us, I guess.
But also, you know, what I see is to put our ego down, meaning it is so, when she's talking to you personally, individually, it's so easy to understand that you have to do it, right? Also, because if you don't, she'll just scold you and you get kicked out of sight. Like, there are consequences. Right now, we might get messages from the divine in a subtle form, but do you have the humility to take it on board? You know, when you're like, oh no, this I'm just imagining. You know what I mean? It's like it's about your sincerity to yourself, right? It's much harder now to do it that way.
Yeah.
I think personally it depends on how stable you are, because on that, on subtly, you have to be really stable. But also depends on the context, on where you're living. Just like families, families somehow have to be also stable in a collective, and it really everything. I think everything depends on the context. Why am I saying this? Because when I grew up outside of the Sahaj bubble, I had many, many yogis in my collective. So for every puja, I would go to Romashram, do my wonderful puja, stay with the yogis, and just that was Sahaja Yoga. So I wasn't far from the collective. So I could leave the both things, you know. But what was it your case, Fatima? Because if I'm not wrong, in France in this time was a bit different. You weren't living in France exactly. I don't remember this.
Yeah, so we moved to France in 88. I was 5 and my brother was 2. He was very young. And my dad had gotten a job opportunity there, so we moved close to Paris at first. And I remember at school, I was having a great time. I was in class 1, and there were kids, you know, from all over. In my class. There was an Indian kid, there was an African kid, there was, you know, from all over. And I remember being very comfortable in this environment because I guess this is what we had been used to, you know, as yogis, meeting people from all over the world. So in that sense, it was not a French school, you know. And then we moved when I was around 7. We moved to the countryside, 1 hour away from Paris. And my parents had bought a plot of land and they were building a house there. They thought, you know, it would be nice for us to grow up in, you know, in the nature and a little more protected environment. And that was a time where all the kids our age in the collective and in the other countries were going to Dharamshala. So my parents were wondering, okay, what should we do? My mom was fine with it. I think my dad was a little more attached. But if Maji would have said, you know, they have to go, I mean, there was no question, you know, he would have sent us. And that time Shimaji had come to Paris and my mom was called, you know, to help with the cooking. And she was hoping to be able at some point to ask that question, you know, Mother, what should I do? Should I send them to Dharamshala or not? And she had this moment with Shimaji, but Shimaji somehow didn't let her ask her question, you know. And Shimaji was talking, and she brought up the subject herself. She was actually saying, so where do you live now? And my mom was saying, you know, we bought this plot of land, we are constructing a house. And Shimaji said, is there a school there? And my mom said, yes, it's a little village school, very small school. And Shimaji looked like she seemed to look like far away. And she just said, the children will be fine there. So without her even asking the question, she gave her the answer, and she said, they'll be fine. So she said, okay, then if she trusts me that I can bring them up in this environment, then why there's no reason why I shouldn't trust myself. And
Wow.
that's how we moved, and we landed in this little school in the countryside. It was, the classes were very small, and that was very, only French, white people. And that's the time I was a bit like, I remember in primary school, I didn't have like one good friend. I kept changing, and yeah. It was not easy.
Actually, I have a crazy, this is really insane, but this is just to show the power of Fatima's vibrations and story recollection. She
Oh,
told us this story. She told, you remember, Lelo, we got this story, yes, 1 week ago when we chat, right? We had the previous chat with her.
Mm-hmm.
Two days after, I had a dream with Shimaraji. 2 days after that, she told this story. And basically, now the context is a bit similar because my kids just came back from such school. They're a bit older. They're going to French, new language, meeting with non-yogis, getting used to the house and Swiss society. Like, it's been like chaos, all over. We're trying to. And so we both are like, oh man, this is kind of tough. We wonder if we did the right decision to bring them home, this and that. And basically, I have this dream of Shimaji talking to my mom telling all the story to Shimaji, oh, my son, his sons and his wife and this and that. And just as Fatima described, Shimaji poses. She looks like in toward the sky, almost squinting her eyes like to see at the future, and to see where we are, what's gonna happen. That looks back to my mom and it's like, they'll be fine. They'll all be all right. Not to worry about anything. Everything will work out. And it's insane. Literally, it's almost like the same story, just repeated 15 years later, with a different context, but the same thing. And that completely fulfilled my heart, And I think that's so important for all the people that are not sending their kids to such schools. Again, it's amazing when they go to such schools, they get so much. But I think as a parent, you need to have faith in mother, in yourself, in your kids, that no matter what, you can make things all right. You can work hard together and you can pray to her so that things work out. And there are challenges. The schools can be insane, things that happen in the schools, in the normal public schools. But these kids are not just random kids, they're saints from previous ages, right? And it's so easy to forget that because you meet them now as teenagers. It's completely confusing the way they behave, that spiritual power doesn't always come out. But so for me, it was amazing. I just heard this story and like 2 days after I have like a similar dream, when she was just like, your family, everything will be all right, don't worry.
Also, can I add something, not to what you just said, because I don't have
Yeah.
dreams with Shimadaji. We are not all like you, Fabrizio. Having one dream every 2 days is getting tiring to receive 5 minutes audios every day. But also the pro of growing up in outside of the Sahaj environment, I think, is friends.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that in my experience that the people that I grew up with here in my neighborhood in Rome are still here. Now they don't have, not even, I think, the mindset that yogis have, that they might move somewhere else in 1 week. So that person that you grew up with is really far from you. So friends in Sahaja, in your collective, are really momentarily, I would say. The friendship is always there. Brother and
Yeah.
sister is still very strong. But the friends that you have outside of Sahaj, they are still here. And that's incredible to me, because it's really important to have a friend outside of your Sahaj bubble that is constantly there with you. Friendships are completely different compared to Sahaj and non-Sahaj life.
No, totally. I agree with you. And that's why it's so important to nurture these friendships in Sahaj, because as you say, you might be isolated in your collective, but what really was a saving grace for my brother and I while growing up is that my mom made sure that at every holiday, and I have to do it because I'm not doing it with my kids as much as she used to. There was either a little seminar that they would organize or get us together, and then when we grew up around the age of 15 and all that, there was Dalio. And I remember at the end of the year, like craving to just be with my friends in Sahaj who, you understand each other, on another level, and you're not alone, because it can be very isolating sometimes, even though you have good friends outside of Sahaj. But these moments, and to make it not maybe just once a year, this is too far apart, but
Yeah.
be able to meet as much as possible really goes a very long way, because that's where you can be completely yourself. And yeah, it's so important. So these little seminars, or even just informally, getting 2 or 3 kids together,
Yeah.
a big difference. Yeah.
I mean, on this point you made, Lele, friendship, right? The point ultimately is friendship. I think there's two important aspects. One is that, I mean, it's scientifically proven that between, like, I don't know, 0 to 6, you're completely dependent on the mother. Between 7 to 12, the father figure becomes your role of reference, right? And 13 to 20 is your friends. Like, literally, the most important people in your life are your friends, right? So there's something natural, chemically built in us that pushes you toward that direction. And that's why I think both also what Fatima says is important is you really want to make sure that when your kids is between 13 and 20, he has good friends. Definitely good such friends, because they're the ones that are going to show the value, but also good non-such friends, because in the class, there's some good kids and some bad kids, right? And then to me, the second point is also, if you hear the speeches of Shimaraji, every 5 speeches, maybe one of them is on giving self-realization. Like it's a topic that is just comes up all the time, right? And the point is, how are you going to give self-realization to people if you don't have friends outside your bubble of Sahaj, right? Like, you literally need to step out of the bubble in order to give self-realization. And of course, you can go to the program, you can go to the fairs and all of that, which is important. But ultimately, people will come to Sahaj because they see something special in you in a daily life. And those are your colleagues, your friends, your people at school, right? So to have good friends outside Sahaj, it's almost a mission that we have, because it's the mission of spreading that light, right? And you can't do it if you're stuck within your world, right?
Yes, it's what is really interesting is that once you have a really good friendship with these people outside of Sahaja, first of all, you actually find out that they are way more open-minded than you think, in terms
Yeah,
of they absorb everything from the society. And sometimes growing up in Sahaj, you only absorb things from Sahaj. So the narrow-minded sometimes can be us. Is I know is a paradox, but it can be us sometimes. And what is really interesting is that once you get a really, really good friend, you start opening to that person about Sahaja Yoga in general. You know,
yeah,
it's not a secret to my friends that I put my name down.
yeah.
And every time they're like, so are you doing the marriage thing this year? Are you gonna move to somewhere else I'm like, maybe, guys, I don't know, I have to check vibrations. Can you do a banda for me? No, that wouldn't work, but it's really interesting. And also they can also support you in moments where you're struggling with Sahaj. That is crazy now.
Yeah.
And I really love to already know the stories, but Fatima, did you ever find yourself in a position where a friend of yours that wasn't in Sahaj supported you about Sahaj situations?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, the advantage of being in a non-Sahaj school is that we had our friends from very early on. So when they would come home, there was no secret. And especially when you're kids, when you're so young, you don't even have these barriers in your head yet, you know. So everything was completely, there was no separation between school, Sahaj, house, and Shumaji's picture was there. Her feet, we would never take out the picture of the feet. And my friends, when they would come home, they would just, I mean, right from the beginning, you know, we spoke to them about who's Shrimaji. They would meditate with us. And it became a habit, you know, that when they had a problem, they would ask me for a bandan. Or when they would come home, they would say, "Oh, I'm not feeling great. Can you work on me?" I grew up in Sahaj with them. And they also, like, they know everything. They know everything about you, you know, at that age. You're so close to your friends, as you say, you know, you're closer to your friends than your parents, that you're an open book, you know. There's no, these barriers, we put them on later in life. So that helped so much, because there was absolute transparency. They knew everything. And there was a very sweet story, actually, that was in high school. There was this big drama that happened, because when mother bought the castle in the south of France, in Josier, there
Yeah.
was this, there were some really aggressive, attacks against Saj Yoga, and it
Sahaj.
all over the media. They wanted Saj Yoga out, and they used to go and demonstrate in front of the castle, and all kinds of things were happening. And of course, it was on the media, and they were saying, "Oh, this is a sect who's bought the castle." And Sahaja Yoga, of course, then, it was all over the media. It was
Was a big attack.
the
Yeah.
main topic, actually. And when that happened that night, I was like, "Oh my God, how am I gonna, what am I gonna do tomorrow when I go to high school? What are my friends gonna say now?" And I was a bit worried, and I used to wear Shimali spin. Everyone knew, that I was meditating. I was in Saj Yoga. It's like, now what? This is like the moment of truth. Was what is gonna happen? And I was so surprised, because I didn't have to justify myself or anything. But when I went to school, they were all like, "Did you see what is happening? This is insane. I mean, what kind of things they're saying? It's a lie." Because they used to, I think they maybe they spoke about the marriages. There were images of them. I don't know if I'm mixing up everything, but at some point I remember on the TV they were showing, the marriages and everything,
Wow.
yoga.
Yeah.
And my friends were like, "This is nonsense. Look what they are saying, that children are sent to these schools against their will, or this or that." But they were the ones actually defending me. And I was like, wow, look at that. Because right from the beginning, they knew, and I never tried to hide anything. So there was that trust between us.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really beautiful. Yeah, beautiful
And
moment.
and also they knew who you were, right? In the sense that
Exactly.
when they heard on the TV that the yogis are brainwashed, and then they
Yeah,
looked at you and they're
yeah,
like, no, that's not true.
yeah,
Ultimately, that's the best representation we can give, right? If we
absolutely.
shows those qualities, that speaks, 1,000 images and words, right?
Yeah,
It's what you want. I mean, it's a pity that I botched the introduction, because Lele had said something very beautiful and poetical, uh, most likely taken from ChatGPT about bubbles, but it was really nice, nevertheless. No, but my question that just came up to me right now was this also, is like, all right, let's talk about bubbles now. Aside from such schools, but even can be the Saj bubbles or the ashram. The ashram can be a bubble, like you're even in your own world. I feel the bubble is needed. Meaning, for example, when I came to Sahaj, I cannot drop everything else for a couple of years, and it was just growth. Work on my Shri Ganesha principle, work on this, work on that. Like nothing was important, and I really grew. I felt like, I was in this little, this little protection, and that was my only focus, and I really grew. And then when I was mature enough, again, you break the bubble and you go out and you spread that. When you're strong enough, it's a bit like the Easter Puja mythology that Shivaji talks about the egg, right? You have to be reborn, right? But first, you need to have the protection, is to stay inside. Then, when you're ready, you come out. So, I think for modern kids now, and for parents too, but for you as well, it's quite tough because you need to understand when is the time for you to stay in the bubble, because sometimes you're not mature enough. Sometimes you do need to do an experience. Let's say you have problems with, I don't know, the drugs or drinking or whatever, and you're kind of addicted to that. You do need to cut everything from outside. You do need to do an experience that makes you grow inside. You need to spend more time with yogis than with non-yogis because you're weak. You need protection, right? And then there may be somebody who lived their entire life in an ashram, their father and their son and the son of their son, and the same people that always been in the same ashram. No specific example. And and basically maybe it's time to move forward. Is more time to evolve, to be more connected to the normal society, right? And then ultimately the other thing, which is also unfaced, and I wanted to ask you guys what you think, is that, so you have that, first of all, timing, when do I stay in, when do I move out? But the other worry is, for me, is you don't want the kids to create two bubbles, meaning this is my Sahaj bubble, this is where I behave, I give a raki to people, I do this, I do that, and this is my non-Sahaj bubble when I go there, drink and do whatever I want. Like, it should be one world, and if you cannot do that, there's a problem, right?
Also, it's true, and also in my opinion, it really, I'm going back to one thing that I said before, is really all about the context, and what you actually need, which makes me think that Sahaja yoga is not one fixed rule,
Yeah,
because
of
you
course.
you grew up in San Basilio in Rome,
Yes.
which is a neighborhood in which, as soon as you turn the corner, there is someone with a knife asking you for your punyas,
For
trying to steal your lunchbox. They ask
for
you for your
sure.
boons and stuff like that. So you have to give everything or you get stabbed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why you needed, also to spend 2 years in a strict
In
environment,
a bubble, exactly,
in a
exactly.
bubble.
It was my context. Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
some people need to spend their childhood in a bubble to grab a knife and ask for punyas to other people. So it depends really much on the context.
Exactly, is
I
the
don't know where I'm
context.
going with this, but it makes me realize that Sahaja Yoga is not a fixed rule.
Of course. I mean, we didn't say today, but last week we were also discussing with Fatima, like, for example, the fact that when Shimaji asked her to stay home, she was in France, in the countryside, she wasn't into an environment that was extremely terrible or challenging. There was some, and maybe Shimaji looked at the school where she was going, like the context was checked, if you wish, right? And I think that's important. But to me, what is constant, though, if you want to find a constant, is that young kids of a certain age need to fit inside the friendship or context at the school. No matter who you are, you need
Mhm.
to respect yourself into something. Like right now, I'm 40. If people don't like me at work, I couldn't care less. You know what I mean? Like, you grow up to a certain maturity when you have the gravity where that doesn't damage you, right? But as a 15 years old, 17-year old, if you're not acknowledged by your peers, you lose self-esteem, right? So again, maybe there is context there, because, like, okay, you can find your acknowledgement in the yogis around you, right? Of your age. But maybe there aren't. So your parents need to teach you how to find that acknowledgement in the high school friends without losing your way, right? Without becoming them, because you want to transform them. You don't want to become them, right? I agree. It's very hard to, you can't make a rule, because it really depends on the context.
And also on the Paramchaitanya's desire, because I've noticed that if the Paramchaitanya for a while wants you outside of the bubble, or even outside of Sahaja Yoga, things will set in a way that you will find yourself outside. And then as soon as you're fine, or as soon as the Paramchaitanya wants you back, in one instant, you realize that you have to go back now. And did anything like that happen to you, Fatima, in Sevilla?
Yes,
Specifically.
I'm just wondering.
about getting out of the bubble to better integrate the bubble, I would say later on. Yes, there was when I was in Seville,
I was in my third year of uni, and my first 2 years were in Paris, close to home. So I would come back every weekend, and I still had the proximity to my parents, the collective, and all of that, the yogis. But in Seville, there was absolutely nobody. There were no yogis in the south of Spain. And if I had to meet anyone, I would have to take the bus to Madrid, which was 6 hours, to meet, the collective. So that was the first time I was thrown into the unknown, if you wish,
Yeah.
with nobody around, no references. And Spain was a bit brutal, because I would say Sahaj wise, because I arrived and right next to my flat, there was the first night I go out and there was a crowd drinking. That's
Yeah.
called Bodian, where they all drink together. And I remember calling my mom and thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing here. It's, that was the test for me. That was a year where I felt, okay, I know why I am in Sahaj, but also I felt that I have to, if I want to be able to talk to people, and I felt I needed to experiment to a certain extent, and understand also how it feels like if I don't meditate, because I had been meditating religiously since ever, and I'm like, now how does it feel, if I have to talk to a newcomer, I have to be able to connect with him, right? And I just wanted to know what happens if I stop meditating. So I just made that experiment, and I stopped meditating for two months, something like that. And immediately, I felt, slowly that I was going off balance.
Yeah.
I started wearing darker clothes. I would go. I would get really emotional. I was attracted by all these, I started being attracted to boys, liking the idea of having a boyfriend. I was like, yeah, why not, And yeah, so, it's a very fine line
Yeah.
that you are able to maintain when you meditate, but you don't realize it. But as soon as you stop, I mean, in an environment like that, forget it,
Yeah.
you can't stay on that path, right? And then one morning, my dad calls me, and he says they were in India. My parents were in India. Dad was posted there for work, and he said, I went to Pratishthan yesterday. Shimaji called me. She wanted to see me, so I was like, oh my God, you met Shimaji. And he's like, yeah. And you know what she told me? What was the first thing she told me? Is that she said, when I saw your children, because we had met her in the summer, just before that, a few months before that, uh, she was about to fly out to France, and a few yogis, were invited, at the hotel where she was staying in Mumbai, in Juhu. And I had been with my parents and my brother. And so she mentioned that moment, and she said, when I saw your children, I didn't know whether to kiss them or to hug them. And that for me was like, I just melted. I said, look at that, she knows what is happening. She knows everything about me. And this was her way of telling me, I know what you're up to, but I love you nonetheless, And that was it. I was like, okay, now I'm not gonna, there's no messing around. And it was the most beautiful slap of love, if you want,
Yeah.
Um,
Amazing.
how she brings you back and she says, I know what's happening, but I love you. I still love you. I'm your mother. And I said, okay, now done. I know what it feels like not to meditate. And that was it. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think somehow we are also learning how to create a Sahaja society to then export it to the known Sahaj society. And on this wonderful note, I think maybe we might close the episode because it's been like around 50 minutes and it was really interesting. It's always first of all, it's great to have you here as a guest, Fatima, on the podcast. first of all,
Thank
because
you for
it
having
was
me.
like really good sharing of ideas and experiences. So we have seen how to grow up outside of a Sahaj environment, how to go back to the Sahaj environment. Sahaj stories with Shimadaji seen from a kid perspective. You know, many things. We covered many things. I'm gonna cut this. We didn't talk about the marriage, but I think it's cool. I think we don't have to go there.
This is a whole different podcast, I think.
Another
And
All,
podcast, yeah.
all
so
different episodes.
yeah.
So I think maybe someday you might come back. I would
Yeah.
be really happy to see that.
Sure.
Now that you're warmed up to it.
Yeah, this is just a warm up. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you Fabrizio for being a good host, I would say. Too many dreams, but it's still okay. And thank you Fatima really much for being such a great guest.
Thank you, Lele and Fabrizio. It was a pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening, and see you soon. Ciao, ciao.
Bye,
Ciao.
everyone. Ciao.